Every morning, long before the two suns rose over the hills, the young alien girl named Lyra woke up quietly inside her small home. She always tried not to make noise because her mother slept in the corner, coughing softly through the night. The house was simple, no proper walls, only woven branches and cloth to keep out the cold wind. But to Lyra it was still home. She would look at her mother first. If her mother was breathing calmly, Lyra felt a little relief. But most days, her mother struggled to breathe, her hands shaking as she tried to sit up. The sickness had slowly taken her strength, and now she could not walk far. She needed clean water every day to survive. And on their planet, water was not easy to find. Lyra was only 12, but she had taken responsibility for everything. She cooked, cleaned, collected firewood, and cared for her mother. But the most dangerous task, the one she feared every day, was fetching water from the river deep inside the valley. The path was long and full of threats, sharp rocks, wild creatures, and bandits who hid between the trees. Still, she went every morning. She picked up the empty container, tied it with a rope across her shoulder, and stepped outside. The sky was dark purple, and the air was cold enough to bite her skin. She glanced back at her house once more, whispering in a small voice, "I will come back soon, Mama." Then she began her walk. The path started with loose sand and dry grass, but as she walked further, it changed into rough stones and thick bushes. The forest around her was silent, except for small rustling sounds, maybe harmless animals, maybe dangerous ones. Lyra never knew. She tried to walk quickly, but the heavy container rope burned her shoulder, slowing her down. Every day, fear walked beside her. She remembered the stories she heard from other villagers, creatures with sharp teeth that came out in the early morning, strange shadows between the trees that followed travelers, and thieves who attacked the weak. But she also remembered why she had to continue. Her mother needed the water. Without it, she would get worse. Lyra tightened her grip on the container and kept going. Soon, she reached the narrow cliffside path. The trail here was steep, and one wrong step could make her fall far below. She pushed her breath out slowly to calm herself. She placed one foot carefully, then the other. The wind blew strongly, making her small body sway. Her thin legs trembled, but she did not stop. Halfway across the cliff, she heard a low growl behind her. Her heart jumped. She did not look back right away. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and finally turned her head. Nothing was there, only shadows and rocks. But she knew she had heard something. She knew she was not alone. She hurried her steps. When she finally reached the forest floor again, she let out a shaky breath. She touched her chest, feeling her fast heartbeat. "Just a little more," she whispered to herself. The river was close now, but this was the most dangerous part. The trees grew tall and thick here, blocking the light. Strange creatures lived between the roots and branches. Lyra walked faster. As she reached the river, she finally felt a small moment of peace. The water glowed with a soft blue color, reflecting the morning sun that was rising behind the mountains. This river was the cleanest in their region, which was why she risked so much to come here. Her mother needed clean water, not the dirty water from nearby pits. She knelt by the river, dipped her hands in the cold water, and slowly filled the container. The sound of water splashing around her was gentle, almost comforting. She wished she could stay here longer. But she knew she had to return quickly before the path became crowded with dangers. She closed the lid tightly and lifted the heavy container onto her back. Her small body bent under its weight, but she stood firm. She looked at the long path home and took a deep breath. Then she heard footsteps. Quick, heavy footsteps. She froze. At first she thought it might be a wild animal. But animals did not walk like that. This was different. Someone was moving through the forest fast. Panic filled her chest. She grabbed the container rope tightly and ran. The footsteps grew louder, coming closer and closer. Lyra did not want to look back. She was too scared of what she might see. Her feet hit the ground hard as she dashed between trees, her breath loud in her ears. She felt branches tearing at her clothes and cutting her arms. She stumbled but kept running. Then the footsteps suddenly stopped. Lyra stopped too. She hid behind a tree, shaking. She listened carefully. Silence. But she knew the forest was never silent unless something powerful was nearby. She slowly peeked over the tree trunk. And there, far behind her, she saw the figure.
Tall, broad.
Not alien. Not from her village. A human. A stranger she had never seen before. He stood quietly, watching her, but not in a threatening way. His expression looked more like surprise and concern. His clothes were different from anything on her planet. His posture was calm, not dangerous. Lyra's fear softened a little. She stepped back, confused. Why was a human here? Humans rarely came to this region. They stayed in big cities far away. But this one was right in front of her path. Her heart still raced, but now for a different reason. She didn't know yet that this meeting would change everything, not only for her, but for her sick mother as well. And tomorrow, she would not have to walk the dangerous path alone again. Not after the human stranger saw her. Not after he decided to follow her.
Not after he chose to help.
Long before Lyra ever walked the dangerous path to the river, life in her village used to be different. Her people once had a working well at the center of their small community, and no one had to travel far for clean water. Children played around the houses, mothers cooked outside, and neighbors helped one another. But everything changed the year the Great Drought came. The first signs were small. The crops grew thin, the soil cracked, and the animals stopped coming close to the village. Slowly, the well water began to dry until the bottom became nothing but dry mud. People panicked. Some families moved away, searching for better land. Others stayed but became desperate, fighting over what little water remained. Lyra remembered watching old friends pack their belongings and leave in silence. But her family could not leave. Her mother was too sick. The sickness had started quietly 2 years earlier. At first, it was just a cough. Then her mother felt tired all the time. Soon after, walking even a short distance made her dizzy. Lyra's father tried to take her to the city for treatment, but the journey was long and dangerous. One morning, he left to find medicine and never returned. No one knew what happened to him. Lyra and her mother waited for days, weeks, then months, but he never walked through the door again. Without him, everything became harder. Lyra was just a young girl, but she was all her mother had. She learned to cook, clean, and carry heavy things. She learned how to stay quiet when her mother cried at night from the pain. She learned how to be brave, even when she was scared all the time. When the drought came, the village had no choice but to survive on whatever water they could find. But the nearest clean source was the river deep in the valley, a dangerous place even for adults. Many villagers refused to go there. Some were attacked by wild creatures.
Some got lost.
Some simply never returned. Still, Lyra's mother needed water every day. And Lyra was the only one who could bring it. The villagers knew her situation, but no one stepped forward to help. People were afraid. They barely had enough for themselves. Some families offered her advice: go early when the animals sleep, or walk fast past the middle forest, but advice was not enough. Lyra still had to walk the path alone. Every morning she prepared quietly, even though her body trembled with fear. Her mother always tried to stop her. Lyra, it's too dangerous, her mother whispered one morning, coughing softly. Please don't go every day. But you need water, Lyra replied gently, placing a blanket over her mother's shoulders. I'll be careful. I promise. Her mother looked at her with tired eyes. If something happens to you, I will lose everything. Lyra felt a painful squeeze in her chest. She knew her mother didn't want her to risk her life, but she also knew there was no other way. Without clean water, her mother's health would get worse. So every morning, Lyra walked the dangerous path, carrying the empty container and praying she would return home safely. There were days when Lyra wished for help. She wished for someone strong, someone brave, someone who could walk beside her. But no one came. People in the village were busy with their own struggles. Some pitied her, but none of them offered a hand. And Lyra did not complain. She didn't want to be a burden. She believed she was alone, until the day she saw the human in the forest. That morning, after filling the container at the river, Lyra had felt something strange. Something she could not explain. She felt as if someone was watching her, not with danger, but with concern. When she finally looked behind her and saw the tall human figure, her heart froze. Humans were rare in her region. Most lived far away in better cities with cleaner water and stronger resources. What was a human doing in this dangerous forest? He had not followed her closely. He kept a respectful distance, standing still, watching her with calm eyes. His clothes were sturdy, made for travel. He looked like someone who had walked long distances too. But he did not move toward her. He did not threaten her. He simply stood there, as if trying to understand why a small girl was alone in such a dangerous place. Lyra was confused. She wanted to run, but something in the human's eyes stopped her. He didn't look angry or frightening. He looked concerned, as if he understood the danger she was walking through every day. Still, Lyra ran home.
She didn't look back.
Her heart raced all the way until she reached her small house. Her mother noticed her shaking hands. "Lyra, what happened?" her mother asked, trying to sit up. "Nothing," Lyra whispered. "I'm just tired." She didn't want to worry her mother. She didn't mention the human.
Not yet.
That night, Lyra lay awake, thinking about the stranger. Why had he been there? Was he lost? Was he dangerous? Or was he someone who might help?
She did not know.
But the next morning, as she stood outside her house with the empty container, she felt something different in the air. A strange feeling that she was no longer walking the path alone. She didn't know it yet, but the human stranger had seen her fear. He had seen her thin arms struggling under the weight of the container. He had heard her quick, frightened footsteps.
And he had made a decision.
He would follow her path again. This time not to observe, but to help. And soon, Lyra would learn the truth. She wasn't the only one with a heavy burden. And the human had reasons of his own for being in the dangerous forest. The forest that Lyra walked through every morning looked quiet from far away, but anyone who lived near it knew the truth. It hid dangers that even adults feared. Lyra had learned to walk carefully, moving with the silence of someone much older than her age. But no matter how careful she was, the forest never felt safe. This morning, the air was colder than usual. The sky was still dark, and a thin mist floated above the ground. Lyra tightened her cloak around her shoulders and stepped onto the dry path with her empty container. Her mother was sleeping when she left, her breathing soft but weak. Every step reminded Lyra why she woke up before sunrise. Most dangerous creatures slept at this hour. Once the suns rose higher, the forest came alive with sounds and shadows she didn't want to face. The earlier she went, the safer it was. At least, that's what she told herself. But today felt different. The forest was too quiet. No insects buzzing. No leaves rustling. No distant animal calls. Lyra felt a shiver run through her body. She walked faster. She remembered stories told by the elders, stories of hunters disappearing in the mist, of silent beasts that moved like ghosts, of bandits who watched the path waiting for easy prey. Lyra used to think those were just old tales meant to scare children. But now she knew they were warnings. She had seen footprints before. She had heard low growls in the fog. She had heard screams once, far away but real. Still, she kept walking. The trees grew taller around her, their branches twisting like long fingers reaching toward the ground. The forest floor was uneven, filled with stones and roots that could trip her if she wasn't careful. Lyra kept her eyes on the path. She told herself she was brave. She told herself she had no choice. As she reached the narrow cliffside, she slowed her steps. This part always scared her the most. One slip could send her falling down the steep rocks. She pressed her hand against the wall of the cliff and took careful steps. Her small feet trembled with every move. Halfway across, she heard something, a soft scratch against stone. She froze. Her heart beat loudly in her ears. She held her breath. The scratching sound repeated, closer this time. Lyra slowly turned her head, her eyes wide with fear. On a large rock above her, she saw it. A Varan beast. Small but fast, with glowing eyes and sharp claws. It watched her with a hungry stare. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She had heard stories about these creatures. They hunted in silence, and they attacked quickly. "Please not today," she whispered. The creature lowered its body, preparing to jump. Lyra forced herself to move. She slid sideways along the cliff, keeping her back pressed tight against the stone wall. She tried not to make noise. She tried not to cry. Her legs trembled so much she almost slipped. The Varan beast let out a low growl. Lyra felt tears rise in her eyes. Then suddenly, a heavy thump echoed in the forest. The beast snapped its head toward the sound. Something had landed on the path behind it. Lyra couldn't see clearly through the mist, but she saw a tall figure. A shadow. The beast hissed and ran off into the trees. Lyra stayed frozen for several seconds. Her breath came in shaky gasps. She slowly moved again, careful not to fall. When she finally reached the other side of the cliff, she collapsed to her knees, her hands shaking. She looked back, but the shadow was gone.
She knew who it might be.
The human from yesterday. But she couldn't be sure. Lyra stood again, wiped her eyes, and continued her journey. The forest felt less threatening now. It was strange, as if someone was watching over her. As if she wasn't as alone as she thought. When she reached the river, she filled her container, like always. She dipped the container into the glowing blue water and waited for it to fill completely. The sound of water calmed her. She needed moments like these, moments when she could pretend she was just a normal girl doing normal things. But peace never lasted long in this forest. As she lifted the full container onto her back, she heard something behind her. Not footsteps, something heavier. Something slow. Something breathing. She turned slowly, gripping the container rope tightly. A giant shadow creature stood at the edge of the trees. Its body was tall and thin, with long limbs and dark skin that blended with the shadows. Its eyes glowed white as it stared straight at her. Lyra's heart nearly stopped. She stepped backward, but the creature stepped forward. Her hands shook. She couldn't even scream. The creature raised its long arm, and then a loud crack exploded through the forest. A rock had smashed into a tree near the creature's head. The creature hissed and turned sharply. Another rock flew, harder, faster, hitting the creature's shoulder. The creature let out a deep growl and slowly backed away, vanishing into the trees. Lyra stared at the trees, breathing fast. Then she saw him. The human. He stepped out of the forest with calm, careful steps. He wore a heavy jacket, boots covered in dirt, and a small pack on his back. His expression was steady, but his eyes showed concern. Lyra didn't move.
She didn't know what to say.
The human raised his hands slowly, not to attack, but to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said in a gentle voice. "You're safe." Lyra didn't understand all of his words, but she understood his tone. Safe. The forest had never felt safe. Not until now. Not until him. For the first time, she realized something important. The human wasn't just passing through. He was following her path on purpose. And he wasn't doing it out of curiosity. He was protecting her. The human's name was Rian, though Lyra did not know that yet. Days before their paths crossed, he had been walking through the valley on his own mission. He was not from the region, not from any nearby city. He was a traveler, someone who had lost more than he cared to admit, someone searching for a quiet place to escape his past. He never expected to find a child walking alone through the most dangerous forest in the region. It happened 3 mornings earlier. Rian had been sitting on a fallen tree, checking the maps in his backpack. The forest around him was still half dark, filled with mist. He planned to continue traveling before the sun rose, but a soft crunch of footsteps caught his attention. He turned his head. That was when he saw her for the first time, a small girl walking through the mist with an empty container tied to her back. She moved quietly, her shoulders slightly hunched, as if she carried not just a container, but the weight of something much heavier. Rian watched her for a moment, surprised. Children didn't walk alone in forests like this. Not unless something was very wrong. She didn't notice him. Her eyes were fixed on the path, her steps careful but quick. Rian frowned. He had heard stories from travelers about young aliens forced to walk dangerous distances for water, but he never imagined he would witness it himself. When the girl disappeared deeper into the forest, he stood, packed his things, and followed her, not closely, but at a distance where she wouldn't notice. He wanted to make sure she reached her destination safely. He told himself it was just for one day. But even on that very first morning, he saw enough to tell him one thing. This child faced danger every single day. Lyra had walked the narrow cliff path that morning just as she always did. Rian was far behind, hidden between trees. When she slipped slightly on a rock, his heart jumped. She didn't fall, but she trembled, steadying herself with both hands. Rian clenched his jaw. A child shouldn't have to do this. Then she continued on, unaware of the silent guardian behind her. He watched her reach the river, fill the container, struggle to lift it onto her back. She bent under the weight, almost falling forward. The container looked almost as heavy as she was. That image stayed with him. He watched her return home, too. She walked slower because of the weight, her legs shaking with every step. Every time a creature rustled nearby, she flinched. Every time a branch cracked, she froze in fear. Rian understood something that morning. She wasn't walking the path because she wanted to. She walked it because she had no choice. The second morning, Rian followed her again. This time, he stayed even closer. The forest felt more dangerous. He noticed several fresh claw marks on the trees. He saw large footprints in the mud. The silence felt wrong. And then he saw the Varan beast. It crouched on a cliff above Lyra as she crossed the narrow path. Rian felt cold fear shoot through him. He grabbed a stone and threw it hard against a tree near the creature. The noise startled it and it ran away. Lyra hurried across the cliff, trembling. She never saw him. Rian exhaled in relief, but felt anger rise inside him. How long had she been facing dangers like this? Why was she alone? Where were her parents? He didn't know the answers yet, but he knew the child needed help. The third morning, the morning of the river encounter, changed everything. Rian followed her again, staying close enough to reach her quickly if needed. When he saw the shadow creature stalking her from behind a tree, he acted without thinking. He grabbed 2 heavy stones and threw them with all his strength. The creature retreated, hissing angrily. This time Lyra saw him. She turned slowly, her eyes fearful at first, then confused. Rian raised his hands to show he wasn't a threat. He didn't speak much because he didn't know how much of his language she understood. But the fear in her eyes softened. She understood his intention. He had saved her. Now, in this present moment, Lyra stood before him at the riverside, gripping the container rope tightly. She did not run. She simply stared at him with wide, uncertain eyes. Rian took one slow step forward, then stopped, keeping a distance so she wouldn't feel scared. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said gently. Lyra understood only part of his sentence, but the tone told her everything. She looked at the ground, then back at him. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to speak, but no words came out. Rian pointed at the heavy container on her back. "Too heavy," he said softly. She lowered her gaze, embarrassed. No adult had ever said that to her. No one had ever tried to help. She expected him to leave after saying those words. But instead, Rian slowly moved to the container, showing his hands again before he touched it. He lifted it easily, much more easily than she could. Lyra's eyes widened. He nodded once, as if saying, "I'll carry it." Lyra didn't know what to do. No one had ever offered to carry it before. She hesitated, then took a tiny step forward. Her voice was small, almost a whisper. "For Mama." Rian paused. Mama. So that was why she walked this path every day. He nodded slowly, understanding more than she had explained. "Yes," he said softly. "For your mother." Then he turned and began walking back toward the village, carrying the heavy container as if it weighed nothing. Lyra followed behind him, still unsure, still scared, but with something new in her heart. Hope. For the first time, She wasn't walking the dangerous path alone. Lyra walked behind the human with small, careful steps. She still could not believe what was happening. For years she had walked this dangerous path alone. No one from the village ever offered to help. No one ever asked why a child carried such a heavy container every morning. But this human, this stranger, had not only followed her, he had protected her and carried the water on his own back. The forest looked different now. Not safe, but less terrifying than before. Every time a branch snapped or an animal rustled through the bushes, Lyra flinched out of habit. But then she would look at the human's tall figure in front of her, walking steadily, and her fear softened. He didn't walk fast or slow. He walked at a pace she could follow easily. She studied him quietly. His clothes were thick and strong, made for travel. His boots were worn but sturdy. The container rope rested across his shoulder, but he didn't seem to struggle under the weight. Lyra wondered how someone could be so strong. She wondered where he came from. She wondered why he was helping her.
But she didn't ask. She didn't know how.
For a long time, they walked without speaking. The mist lifted slowly as the suns rose, lighting the forest with soft orange light. Lyra watched shadows disappear between the trees. For the first time in her life, the forest felt almost peaceful. Almost. When they reached the cliff path, Lyra's step slowed. This was always the hardest part. Even with the human beside her, fear tightened in her chest. She placed her hand on the rocky wall, preparing for the careful crossing. Rian stopped and looked back at her. He studied her face, noticing her fear, her trembling hands. He understood. Words weren't needed. He extended his hand. Lyra froze. No one had ever offered her a hand before. She looked at it confused. He nodded gently, encouraging her. Slowly, cautiously, she placed her small hand in his. His hand was warm and steady, strong. Rian didn't pull her. He didn't rush. He simply walked beside her, keeping her hand firmly in his so she wouldn't slip. Each step felt a little easier, a little safer. They crossed the cliff path together, and when they reached the other side, Lyra let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Rian released her hand, giving a small nod as if saying, "You did well." Lyra looked down shyly. Her cheeks felt warm. No one had ever told her she did well. No one had ever held her hand like that. As they approached the edge of the forest, sunlight touched the path. Lyra could see her village in the distance. Small homes made of branches and cloth, smoke rising from early cooking fires, the shapes of tired villagers moving about. She suddenly felt nervous. What would the others think if they saw her walking with a human? Would they be angry? Would they be scared? Would they ask questions she had no answers for? Her steps slowed. Rian noticed immediately. He stopped and looked at her with gentle confusion. Lyra pointed toward the village, then shook her head. She hugged herself tightly, unsure how to explain. But Rian understood enough. She was worried, maybe even embarrassed, maybe afraid of how others would react. He nodded softly. He would not force her to walk beside him. Instead, he lifted the container from his shoulder and carefully placed it on the ground. Then he pointed at himself, then at the forest behind him, making a simple gesture. "I will stay here. You go ahead." Lyra blinked. He wasn't coming into the village. He wasn't expecting anything from her. He wasn't staying for praise or thanks. He was only helping because he wanted to. She stepped closer and touched the container, making sure the lid was tight. Then she looked up at him. Her voice came out soft, almost worried. "You come tomorrow?" Rian understood enough to make sense of her meaning. He thought for a moment. He hadn't planned to stay in this region. He hadn't planned to stay anywhere. His life had been filled with wandering for so long that he no longer knew what home felt like. But when he looked at Lyra, the thin, tired child who faced danger every day for her sick mother, he felt something shifting inside him. He gave a small nod. Lyra's eyes brightened. She lifted the heavy container with both hands. It was still too much for her small body, but she could manage the short walk into the village. Before turning away, she looked at Rian one more time. For the first time since her father disappeared, she felt safe. And for the first time in a long time, Rian felt like he had a purpose again. Lyra walked toward the village. Rian disappeared back into the trees. Neither knew it yet, but their lives were now tied together. A child who needed protection, and a man who needed something to protect. The human named Daniel did not sleep much that night. His mind kept returning to the alien girl's frightened face and her mother's weak breathing. The quiet hut felt too small, and the air felt heavy with worry. But Daniel stayed calm, sitting near the doorway with his old travel bag beside him. He kept watch, just in case something dangerous came close. When the night finally ended, the sun rose slowly behind the trees. Soft light entered the hut, touching the girl's face. She was still sitting next to her mother, holding the woman's thin hand. When she opened her eyes, she found Daniel already awake, sitting on the floor and sharpening a small tool. "You did not sleep?" she asked softly. Daniel shook his head. "It's fine. I wanted to make sure nothing came near the hut." The girl looked at him with quiet gratitude. She had never met anyone, human or alien, who cared this much. Most people passed by their small hut without even looking. Some even refused to speak to them. But this human stranger had stayed, helped, and protected. Her mother's condition had not improved, but it had not gotten worse either. For the girl, that was already a blessing. The human makes a plan. Daniel stood up and brushed the dust off his clothes. "Today, I will build something outside. It will help keep the creatures away." The girl blinked in surprise. "You can do that?" He smiled a little. "I will try." After giving her mother a little water, Daniel stepped outside with tools from his bag. The girl followed him out of curiosity. The morning air was cool, and the forest around them looked peaceful. But both of them knew that peace could change at any moment. Daniel pointed to the trees around the hut. "Your home is too open. Creatures can come from any direction. So I will build barriers and traps, not to hurt them, only to warn us." The girl watched as he tied ropes, sharpened sticks, and used fallen branches to create simple alarm traps. When something heavy stepped on them, the branches would snap loudly. That sound would give them time to hide. "You learned this from your world?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "I traveled a lot when I was younger. Some places were safe, some were not. So, I learned how to survive." The girl admired his skill more than she could express. She wanted to help but did not know how. Daniel noticed her quiet concern. "You can help by watching the path," he said gently. "If you see anything moving, tell me." She nodded quickly and stood near the edge of the trees, keeping careful watch. A dangerous visitor. Around midday, the forest grew silent. Even the birds stopped making noise. Daniel paused, noticing the change. "Something is near," he whispered. The girl's heart beat faster. She looked into the thick trees, and then she saw it. Between the shadows, tall and slow, moved a large beast with dark fur and glowing red eyes. It was the same kind of creature that always stalked the forest. The same kind that had chased her before. She froze, unable to speak. Daniel stepped to her side and whispered, "Don't move." The creature sniffed the air. It seemed to smell the presence of new things, the traps, the human, the changed environment. Then it took a step closer. Snap! One of Daniel's branch traps broke loudly. The beast jumped back in surprise, its eyes narrowing. It growled, confused and irritated by the noise. Then, as if deciding the area was too strange, it finally turned away and disappeared into the deeper part of the forest. The girl let out a long breath she had been holding. "It almost came here." Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "That is why we prepare. You are not alone anymore." Those words warmed her heart more than sunlight ever had. Protecting the mother. By the evening, Daniel had built a stronger door for the hut, repaired the windows, and placed a warning rope around the whole area. Each time something touched the rope, small metal pieces would clink together. Inside the hut, he checked her mother again. The woman's fever had grown, but she was still breathing steadily. "We must get medicine soon," Daniel said. "Tonight I will stay awake again. Tomorrow, we will make a plan to travel." The girl shook her head quickly.
No.
"The path is too dangerous. Even I barely survive it. Daniel looked at her kindly. Yes, it is dangerous. But your mother will not survive without help. And you will not make the journey alone. This time, I will go with you. The girl's eyes filled with tears. No one had ever offered to walk that path with her, especially not for her sake. But why? She whispered. Why help us so much? Daniel looked at her with gentle seriousness. Because no one should face danger every day without hope. And because your mother raised a brave daughter. That alone deserves help. Her tears fell silently, but this time they were not tears of fear. They were tears of relief. The night of watching. That night, Daniel kept watch again. The girl tried to stay awake with him, sitting near the doorway with a small blanket around her shoulders. But she fell asleep leaning against the wall, exhausted. Daniel gently pulled the blanket around her and looked out into the dark forest. The traps clicked softly with the wind. The air was cold, but the hut felt warm for the first time in many years. He promised himself he would do everything he could to keep them safe. Tomorrow, their dangerous journey for medicine would begin, but tonight, for the first time, the girl and her mother were protected. Morning came quietly, painting the sky with soft orange light. Daniel stretched his tired arms after a long night of watching. The girl was still asleep beside her mother, wrapped in a thin blanket. For the first time in many nights, she looked peaceful. But Daniel knew there was no time to rest. Her mother needed medicine quickly. Without it, she would not survive many more days. When the girl woke up, she immediately checked her mother's breathing. The woman was weak, but still alive. Is it time to go? The girl asked, her voice small but steady. Daniel nodded.
Yes.
We must reach the human station before sunset. The girl felt fear inside her, but she also felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. She looked at Daniel and realized she trusted him more than she trusted anyone in her life. The journey begins. Daniel packed only what they needed: water, a few pieces of dried food, and a medical cloth he had found in his bag. He also tied a simple weapon from wood and metal scraps, just in case. Before leaving, he kneeled beside the girl's mother. We will bring back medicine, he said softly. Hold on. The woman's fingers twitched slightly, as if she understood. The girl kissed her mother's forehead, then followed Daniel outside. The forest path looked even more dangerous in daylight. Sharp stones, twisted roots, and thick vines covered the ground. Strange shadows moved between branches. But Daniel walked ahead confidently, always checking for danger. Stay close to me, he said. And if anything seems strange, tell me. She nodded and walked right behind him. Dangers return. After an hour, the forest grew darker. The girl recognized the area and felt her stomach twist. This is where the creatures follow me, she whispered. Daniel stopped and looked around carefully. The trees here were tall and twisted, blocking the sunlight. The air felt heavier. Then a sound. A low growl. Daniel raised his arm, signaling the girl to stop. From the shadows, two glowing pairs of red eyes appeared. The same type of beast that had hunted the girl earlier. They stepped out slowly, growling louder. The girl shook with fear. Run, she whispered. Daniel shook his head. If we run, they will chase us. He stepped slightly in front of her and held the wooden weapon tightly. The beast circled them, curious about the new human scent. One beast lunged forward, but Daniel swung the weapon with full force, hitting its snout. The creature stumbled back, roaring in pain. The second beast tried to attack from behind, but the girl shouted, "Behind you!" Daniel turned just in time, blocking it with his arm and pushing it away. The creature snapped its jaws dangerously close to his shoulder. Daniel grabbed a broken branch from the ground and struck the beast again. After two more loud roars, both creatures backed away, confused and angry. Then, finally, they retreated into the forest. The girl rushed to Daniel. Are you hurt? He breathed hard but smiled. Nothing serious. For the first time, the girl felt something new. She felt safe because someone was truly protecting her. Reaching the human outpost. Hours passed. Finally, they reached the edge of the forest. Ahead, across an open field, stood a small human outpost, metal walls, antennas, and a bright flag waving in the wind. The girl had never seen anything like it. "That is where we will get the medicine," Daniel said. But as they approached, guards appeared at the gate. They pointed their weapons at them. "Human and alien child, stop." The girl hid behind Daniel in fear. Daniel raised his hands. "We need help. There's a sick woman. She's dying." The guards looked at each other. One of them stepped forward. "Why risk your life for an alien?" he asked coldly. Daniel's voice was firm. "Because kindness is not only for our own kind." The guards stared at him. Then one of them lowered his weapon. "Bring them inside." The medicine. Inside the outpost, everything was bright and clean. Human medics examined the girl's mother's condition through Daniel's description. They quickly prepared a package of medicine and emergency supplies. "She needs this immediately," one medic said. "She will recover if it is given in time." Daniel bowed his head in gratitude. "Thank you." The girl took the medicine in her hands, as if it were something sacred. She looked at Daniel with wide eyes. "We must go back," she said. "Mama is waiting." A long journey home. They hurried back through the forest. This time, Daniel walked even faster, knowing every minute counted. When they finally reached the small hut, the girl ran inside first. "Mama, Mama, we brought medicine." Her mother was barely conscious, her breathing shallow. Daniel mixed the medicine with water and gently helped the woman drink. At first, nothing happened. The girl pressed her hands together, praying silently. Then, the woman's breathing became steadier. Her eyes opened slightly. She looked at her daughter, then at Daniel. A weak smile formed on her lips. The girl burst into tears and hugged her mother gently. "You're going to be okay, you're going to be okay." Daniel sighed with deep relief. The day everything changed. Hours later, the mother slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Outside the hut, Daniel sat with the girl under the evening sky. "You saved us," she said softly. Daniel shook his head. "You saved your mother. You walked that dangerous path every day. You kept fighting." She wiped a tear and looked up at him. "But you helped us no human ever helped us before." Daniel smiled gently. "Well, today, everything changed." The girl leaned against his arm, feeling safe, protected, and no longer alone. For the first time in their lives, the little family had hope, and it all began the day a human stranger chose to help them.